From CBS 4 News, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Good morning, I'm Jim DeFede and welcome to Facing South Florida. This morning we have an extended interview with Congresswoman Val Demings. She is running to be the Democratic nominee to take on Republican Marco Rubio in the Senate race this November. Demings is a former police chief from Orlando who began to make a name for herself during former President Donald Trump's first impeachment trial. We conducted this interview earlier in the week as the Senate was getting ready to take on the voting rights bill that was a priority for Democrats. The bill ultimately failed because Democrats were unable to get rid of the filibuster. But before we jumped into the merits of the bill and the filibuster, I asked her about President Joe Biden's speech in Atlanta, where he likened those who oppose his efforts to Bull Connor and Jefferson Davis. Take a listen to what the president said.
Do you want to be on the side of Dr. King or George Wallace? Do you want to be on the side of John Lewis or Bull Connor? Do you want to be on the side of Abraham Lincoln or Jefferson Davis?
I asked Demings if those comments were over the top.
Well, Jim, let me just say this, and good morning. It's great to be back on your show. You know, I remember my parents, if I could start here. My father was a janitor who went to work 7 days a week doing odd jobs. My mother was a maid. They worked long, hard days, but Jim, I can never remember a time growing up that they did not press their way to the polls to cast their votes. You know, I thought it was required by law, really, as a child, because they were so faithful to it and so dedicated to it. And I think they understood, well, number one, they saw it as their civic duty, but they understood that their vote counted as much as the richest man or woman in town. It mattered to them. We just celebrated Dr. King's birthday, but it has to be more than a celebration, regardless of what the agenda is, whether it's on the Republican side of the aisle or the Democratic side of the aisle. The right to vote is the foundation on how we build a great nation. And we have to do everything within our power to protect it. We have to have commitment. We have to have passion about it. We have to refuse to go back to a darker time. We cannot let Dr. King's assassination be in vain, nor can we let John Lewis's beatdown on the Edmund Pettus Bridge be in vain. And so voting rights is the cornerstone of our democracy. And the president was passionate, but we all need to be, regardless of our political standing. Voting rights matter.
But I do want to just press you on this point, comparing those who do not necessarily agree with the voting rights bill that you advocate, which, you know, is it right to compare those who oppose it to Bull Connor and, you know, Jefferson Davis? That, you know, we're talking about a bill that would, you know, Republican efforts have been to limit the number of drop boxes, require voter ID. Is that really the same as beating, you know, John Lewis on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, or sicking dogs on people as Bull Connor did, or leading an insurrection against the United States government as Jefferson Davis did as the president of the Confederacy?
You know, my mother used to tell me, be sure that people understand clearly where you stand. Be bold, be courageous, be passionate, be serious about those things that matter. Look, the president of the United States, regardless of who he or one day she is, they can use whatever language they feel is appropriate to drive their message home. But let me say this, for those who would rather focus on getting their feelings hurt because of the president's language that he used, I really wish they would have the same passion and commitment to protecting something that Dr. King lost his life for. We've seen some of those same people, Jim, who were offended by the president's words, stand up and quote Dr. King and all that he stood for and all that he died for, but yet is involved in efforts to suppress the right to vote. And so the president, whoever he or she may be, Republican or Democrat, As I said, they can use whatever language they want to drive the message home. But this is not about people who got their feelings hurt. This is about protecting one of the most fundamental rights in this great nation that we live in, and that's voting rights. And I'm going to do everything within my power to protect the right that my parents thought was so precious and so sacred.
You wrote a letter, as I mentioned before, to the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, asking to see if the Justice Department can do something about some of the bills that have passed in recent years here in Florida, which you believe curtail the rights of voters. What do you realistically think that Merrick Garland can do in Florida, and what are your major concerns here in Florida?
You know, I think it's interesting that Florida's governor touted the electoral system in Florida as a model for other states to follow. I agree with that. I thought the 2020 process went extremely smoothly. Matter of fact, as you well know, the Trump appointee said that it was the safest and more secure process in recent history. So why would you create a problem and then go around looking for a solution? Any efforts to limit the number of drop boxes, for example, in particular communities. Why would you do that if the voting process in Florida was a model for other states to follow? We should make voting, we should make voting easier for eligible voters, not more difficult. Any efforts to change voter registration, certainly we should have voter ID laws. Look, I was a former police chief. Certainly we should do that. But I believe in Florida, we have created a problem, and now we've created a solution, and now we're going around creating a problem.
What do you believe the motivation is? Do you think that it is motivated to suppress specifically African-American votes?
I think, Jim, it is an effort to, when people struggle, Marco Rubio is one of them because he's been pretty silent on this issue. When people struggle like Marco Rubio to run on their own merit, on their own record, to do what my parents taught me to do, they said, get out there, work hard, play by the rules. And when you win, stand up and celebrate. When you lose, work harder the next time. And I think when people are desperate people do desperate things. And so you continue to move the cheese, you continue to change the laws. And so, you know, yes, I do believe that it is an effort to suppress the vote in certain communities and Black and brown communities, but every Floridian, I want every Floridian, white, Black, brown, every Floridian to have the opportunity to cast their vote. And we have to be careful with restrictive laws, because what can affect, what did Dr. King say? Justice denied anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so this is an issue that we all, regardless of the color of our skin, should be extremely concerned about.
If you were elected a United States Senator, would you vote to do away with the filibuster?
You know, Jim, I wrote an op-ed several months ago saying that we needed to get rid of the filibuster, simply because any procedure in this country and all of its greatness has modified itself and, you know, modified laws throughout our history to become that more fairer, more perfect union that we were created to be. When we look at the history of the filibuster, and it was interesting to listen to an interview that Dr. King did over 50 years ago, where he talked about the filibuster basically being moved as an obstructive measure to prevent civil rights and voting rights at that time. We could have taken that same speech, Jim, and put it down right here in the United States Senate today. I believe, you know, the Senate, that was supposed to be the most effective, the best deliberative body in the world, where the Senate needs to live up to who it is supposed to be. Any procedure that would obstruct a person's basic rights, women's rights, human rights, civil rights, rights of equality, we need to get rid of it or modify it in those instances. I think the president said this, modified in those instances where basic human rights, constitutional rights are being undermined. And certainly this is one of those times.
Well, let me ask you this, because there's been a criticism of those Democrats who now support removing the filibuster. Did you speak out against the filibuster when Donald Trump was president and Democrats in the Senate used it, I believe, 200 or 300 times at least? You know, they used the filibuster to be able to block President Trump's agenda at times in the Senate. Why was the filibuster good when President Trump was president, but it's not good now that President Biden is president?
Jim, let me say this. Yeah, as you well know, I was a 27-year law enforcement officer. When I worked at the police department, I could not tell you the political party of the overwhelming majority of men and women that I worked with. It didn't matter. We had a mission and we were laser focused on accomplishing that mission. And that was to keep Orlando safe and to improve the quality of life of the people that we serve. I took that same spirit and attitude to the U.S. House of Representatives, and I will take that same spirit and attitude to the United States Senate. What we are talking about here, Jim, is not just a political agenda, you know, and look, political agenda on our side is very, very important. And I'm sure the political agenda on the Republican side is very, very important, but we are talking about legislation that affects basic human constitutional rights. That's in a different category. Look, the filibuster was just modified or pushed aside to raise the debt ceiling. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe that the good faith and credit of the United States is important. But when we're talking about basic human rights, then we should make exceptions. And so that's where we are with voting rights. But whether it's voting rights, women's rights, equality, all men and women, I'm sure the founders, let me help them, all men and women are created equal. Yeah, this is one of those moments.
I do want to turn to Marco Rubio, I promise, and we'll talk more about the comparisons between the two of you. But there was something in the news this week which has, again, caused a lot of consternation among people. And it's one of your fellow Democrats here in Florida, Nikki Freed, made a comment about Ron DeSantis, likening him to Adolf Hitler. You know, she was asked, are you comparing DeSantis to Hitler? And Freed responded, in a lot of ways, yes. Now, the Florida Anti-Defamation League weighed in and they said, while public officials may have disagreements over policies, comparisons to the Holocaust and Nazism are inappropriate, offensive, and trivialize this unique tragedy in human history. Nikki Freed has doubled down. I'm not asking you to speak on behalf of Nikki Freed, but I am curious what your reaction is to what she said and if you think her comments were appropriate.
Well, Jim, you know, when we get back to that better person, that better patriot that we all should be trying to be, I think no person really should be involved in name calling, but we've seen it. Now, let us not act like we have not on both sides of the aisle. Gosh, we saw a whole reservoir of name calling out of the White House. So let us not act like we've never heard it before. But the bottom line is we all need to tap into our better selves and become laser focused on solving problems. Look, Commissioner Freed and Governor DeSantis just might have the opportunity to duke it out on a debate stage. I don't know. But the bottom line is, can't we be civil and decent and honorable and really start working together? And look, I don't hold Republicans to a standard in that area that I don't hold Democrats to the same standard. Let's get better at solving Florida's problems and America's problems. And we all will be better for that.
More from Congresswoman Val Demings when we return.